Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar. I'm going to give us just a couple more minutes and let a few others join in. We'll get started briefly.
Kelly, Jennifer Green here. I'm not hearing anything. I'm just double checking with you that that's the way it is for all participants.
Yes, I believe we're just waiting for a few more people. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Kelly Yearick. I'm a program manager with Forest, and I'm just going to give us maybe 1 or 2 more minutes to welcome in a few last minute stragglers in, and then we'll get started. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you to everyone who's called in today and joined us on the line. My name again is Kelly Yearick. I'm a program manager with Forest. And so today we've got the next installment in our Utility Working Group webinar series. This will be the last one of 2018. We'll be launching our next webinar series next year. So keep an eye out or ear out for that. We'll be sure to keep you informed of upcoming events. In this webinar today, we'll be exploring programs occurring around the country to encourage electric vehicle adoption and reduce overall carbon emissions. We've got 2 wonderful speakers lined up to discuss their work to promote EVs at their respective utilities. Just to give you information about the structure of today, each speaker will have about 15 to 20 minutes to present, and then there will be time for some questions at the end. So we expect our content to last just short of an hour, and then we'll have about half an hour in the webinar for questions. But of course, if we finish up a little bit early and we can get you back to your days, that will be all right as well. There is a chat area in the webinar panel on the left-hand side where you can ask questions. There's also a Q&A box along the top edge of your webinar panel where you can also ask questions. I'll be monitoring those questions as they come in throughout the webinar, and we can address those and any others that you have at the end after both of our speakers have had a chance to present. We are recording this webinar as well, so it'll be made available to you afterward to share as you see fit. So before we get into our presentations, I'd just like to introduce myself. So my name is Kelly Yearick, as I've said. I'm a program manager with Forth, and I am handling our utility engagement work. So Forth is a nonprofit trade association based in Portland, Oregon that serves primarily Oregon and Washington, but our footprint is constantly growing to extend beyond that. Our mission is to promote electric, smart, and shared transportation. We have members from utilities, OEMs, municipalities, nonprofits, etc., and we work with these organizations to move the needle on EV adoption and promote emerging mobility options. We believe this work is crucial because electric vehicles only make up 2% of all vehicles in Oregon, and studies show that consumer awareness about electric vehicles is still incredibly low. A study out of UC Davis just this year found that even in the largest EV market in the country, where policymakers, automakers, and advocates are incredibly supportive, people are generally unaware of these cars and their many benefits. Furthermore, we've heard time and time again from consumers that they went to the dealership with the best intention of purchasing a plug-in car, but ended up driving away in something different. So one of our major projects is our electric showcase in downtown Portland, where people can come in and learn about electric vehicles, charging, financial incentives, and test drive several cars for free. We're brand neutral and we don't sell anything. Our hope is just to provide information about EVs to consumers so they are well informed to make a purchase when that time comes. So as I mentioned, my work focuses on building relationships with and providing education for utilities about electric vehicles. A number of the services we offer include basic education about EVs and resources, coordinating ride and drive events where people can get behind the wheel of an electric car, consulting on charging station installations, quarterly webinars, as we are experiencing today, transportation electrification plan consulting, dealer outreach, and demonstration projects. But we'd like to see that list grow to meet the need. As consumers consider plug-in vehicle purchases, they will rely on the utility as their electricity provider for information and resources. My goal is to connect utilities across our region to better understand what our other services we might offer to accelerate consumer EV adoption. And then finally, an additional component of my job is to facilitate Forth's role as the backstop aggregator for the Oregon Clean Fuels Program. This program, which is administered by the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, is aimed at decreasing carbon emissions from the transportation sector in the state by 10% between 2016 and 2026. Electricity as a fuel is becoming an increasingly clean way to power our vehicles, and through this program, electricity used to charge electric vehicles can generate money for utilities and their customers. As the backstop aggregator, we're here to help utilities utilize monetized credits generated from residential EV charging to further promote transportation electrification. And specifically, we're capturing the lost value of residential EV charging if a utility does not register itself in the Clean Fuels Program. We're well equipped and positioned to help utilities and their customers realize the benefits of driving electric and believe this program will boost consumer adoption of these and other technologies. As we plan for 2019, we'd like to hear from you about what would best suit your needs and goals for promoting transportation electrification among your consumers. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Christine Grant of Collaborative Efficiencies, and she's going to describe an exciting white paper release we have been working on.
Great, thank you, Kelly. Can everyone hear me okay? Kelly, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So thanks a lot, Kelly. So my name's Christine Grant, and I'm with Collaborative Efficiency, and we're a small consulting firm that's been helping Forth out for the last 2 years or so. So if you've been on one of these webinars before, you've probably heard from me or one of us on the team here. And as Kelly talked about, through our work with Force, we've been doing a lot of work with Pacific Northwest utilities, helping utilities learn more about the EV opportunity, helping utilities do their first ride and drive event ever, and just develop EV strategies. And so the Force and Collaborative Efficiency team has really been focused a lot on utilities on the West Coast and in the Pacific Northwest in particular. But we really wanted to make sure that we were up to date on how utilities across the country are promoting the EV opportunity. So about 2 or 3 months ago, the sort of Force utility engagement team, in partnership with Collaborative Efficiency, started working on a white paper intended to really get an up-to-date snapshot of how and why electric utilities are promoting EVs. And so I've been working in this space for quite a few years now, and in 2014, I was the lead author of a pretty extensive research report for a national organization kind of looking at what utilities have been doing on EVs. And a lot has changed in this space in just a few years. And so we really just wanted to, again, capture how utilities are approaching EVs now. And one of the biggest changes that I'm seeing is just that so many more utilities are engaged in promoting EVs than they were just a few years ago. So really utilities at every level, from large investor-owned utilities to small rural co-ops, we're seeing a lot of different examples of how utilities are investing resources and staff time in not only understanding the EV opportunity, but also preparing for it. And I think what this white paper also shows is that utilities are going from really just talking about EVs to taking action. And so this is a white paper that we've developed, and we're going to be releasing it for free in the next few weeks. And we've really tried hard to keep it short. It's about 10 pages, and we drafted it in a way where we wanted it to be skimmable, because we know that everyone's really busy and maybe you're going to be looking for some, a specific piece of information. But it would be a great report to share with coworkers that are just getting up to speed on electric vehicles, or maybe coworkers that would like a refresher with some more up-to-date information on electric vehicles, really intended for a utility audience. But that said, there's a lot of good information that EV veterans will appreciate about some of the new approaches we're seeing to EV program design. And so again, kind of the theme of the report is that we're really just explaining why utilities are getting so engaged in this space, and then we highlight about 20 different actions that utilities are taking related to promoting EVs. And we provide real-world examples of utilities doing each of those actions, which is a good transition to introducing our guest speakers, because both Burlington Electric and Austin Electric are featured in our report. So again, look for this white paper to be released in a few weeks, and we'll make an announcement over email and give you a way to download it. And if you have any questions about the paper or ways that Force can help you, contact Kelly.
Great. Thank you, Christine. All right. So that said, let's move into the speaker portion of our webinar today. I'll start up with Jennifer Green. So Jennifer Green is based at the Burlington Electric Department in Burlington, Vermont, as the city's sustainability officer. So this is the city's municipal electrical provider and is responsible for making Burlington the first city in the country to source 100% of its electricity from renewables. Jennifer's work includes oversight of the Climate Action Plan and various projects and initiatives responsible for Burlington's transition to net zero energy in the thermal and transportation sectors. So Jennifer, I will turn it over to
Great. Well, while the slides are loading, thanks, Kelly, and thanks, Christine. We really appreciate being invited by Fourth and Collaborative Electric to share our work. And not, it's funny when we think about EVs, we think about cars, but of course, bikes, I think, fall under that rubric as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our electric bike program that was launched only a couple of months ago, but just really gaining traction. To be perfectly honest, I think because the economic entree is so much smaller than it is to purchase a full-on electric vehicle, that we're seeing the bikes, a tremendous uptick with the bikes, less than with our car program, as you can well understand. So let's see, I'm going to forward to the first slide. And before I get started, I think it's always helpful to put things in context. I imagine, if I understand correctly, that most of the folks on the phone are potentially West Coast. And so I just want to point out where we are. Here's our little state of Vermont. Burlington is the largest city in the state. And again, as Kelly mentioned, we have our own municipal electric department. It's one of 16 city departments. Burlington's a small city of 42,000 people, but we are the home of the University of Vermont, Champlain College, Ben & Jerry's, and Seventh Generation. The largest big city to us is actually Montreal to our north, and Boston sits just 3 hours south. So that's where we are sort of in relation to the rest of you all on the phone. So when Burlington decided to transition to net zero energy, it was really on the coattails of sort of what we think of as finally reaching our audacious goal of being the first city in the country to source 100% of our electricity from renewables, solar, wind, biomass, and hydro in particular. So that came to pass in 2014, and I think then the next thought was, all right, so how are we going to take it to the next level? And this is when we first drafted our net zero energy strategy in the thermal and transportation sectors. And slowly but surely we're on our way, in part due to the electric bike program that we run. Using our renewable energy standard, or what we refer to as our Tier 3 money, we've calculated the degree to which we can offer rebates on electric bikes. So we do offer $200 off bikes, and all this is available on the Burlington Electric website. We've tried to make it as simple and easy as possible for folks to not only sort of access the cash, but to understand sort of who, what, where, how, and to access their bike. We know that doing it alone is probably not as efficient as it might be, so we've partnered up with some important players. The first here, the center logo, is Local Motion. Local Motion is a bike advocacy group. So sort of following on this model, I know Christine had talked about her white paper, and her 4 main topics were sort of learn, manage, educate, and promote. And I thought about how each of those 4 verbs are really an important part of our program. So Local Motion is a bike advocacy group that works around the state. Its central office is here in Burlington. They also rent bikes as a means to get people used to biking, to introduce them to the concept of biking. They're located on the Burlington Bike Path, which runs up along Lake Champlain. So our first order of business was actually purchasing a fleet of lender bikes. So Local Motion completely manages the program. They worked with the local bike shops to pick which bikes not only would they allow people to borrow for free, but in turn that the bike shops would sell. So there was a lot of communication between all the players to ensure that the left hand was talking to the right, that what you could borrow at Local Motion for 4 or 5 days was actually something that you could then go and purchase with your $200 rebate from BED at our 4 key bike shops. We do have people asking us if they can buy their e-bike online and still get the rebate. And we've decided that in order to build consumer confidence, we really need to ensure that the bikes that people are buying have been tried and true and are sort of approved by our local stores. What we do know is when people do go online and buy their own bikes, that sometimes they can't be well serviced at the local shops, and we're concerned that there'll be, the consumer confidence around e-bikes in general will erode. So we partner with Outdoor Gear Exchange, North Star Sports, Ski Rack, and then lastly, Old Spokes Home. And I just want to take a quick minute to talk a little bit about Old Spokes, which is located in what we refer to as Burlington's Old North End. Burlington is a refugee resettlement community. We have 53 languages spoken in our one public high school, again, small city. So despite the fact that Vermont, as a general rule, is fairly white, Burlington sort of celebrates its ethnicity and diversity, and in particular our new American population. So Old Spokes has found a bike which is less expensive than what might be available at the other shops, with the intent of ensuring that they're available in particular to low and middle income households and new American families in particular. The other, I think, novel thing that Burlington Electric did was decide that in order to get people out of their combustion fuel engines, that with the understanding that electric bikes would literally only go so far, that having access to a car on occasion is actually something that's tough to avoid. So imagine having to scrap wood down to the generating plant or go out and visit family members far out of town. Access to a car is important on occasion. So we've partnered with CarShare Vermont, which is the state's nonprofit car share network. Its headquarters are here in Burlington. So we offer folks who buy an electric bike through our program access to a free car share membership as well. And I can, as the other side of the coin, just so that you all know, we also offer a free bike share membership. We've got a bike share program here in town to anyone that buys an electric vehicle through our EV rebate program. So again, a lot of important partnerships, I think, starting with Local Motion, which is responsible for the lending library, ensuring that folks get out and test bikes free of charge for 4 or 5, even 6 days at a time, to the bike shops who offer the rebate on our behalf and who are well-trained and available to serve and service them. And in particular, Old Spokes, which is strategically located in a neighborhood that caters to folks who really do depend on these electric bikes for their jobs and for their families' economic welfare. And here I am with my electric bike. And I think, I know you had mentioned, Kelly, that we had up to 15 minutes. I think I'm going to end there, but just quickly mention that the bike program was started because 3 or 4 years ago, a woman contacted me up in my office at that point, I was in City Hall. She had a brand new electric bike and she was really excited about it. And she was excited about it because when she moved to Burlington, she realized that our Muslim community members were importing goat meat from New Zealand and Australia for their festivals. And so she decided to start a goat farm out of town in order to make goat meat more readily available and less expensive than the imported variety. So this was with 7 miles out of town. She didn't really want to drive, but biking every day became kind of onerous. So she was the first person I knew to buy an electric bike, and Karen was really adamant that I gave it a try. So sort of with hesitation, I got on her bike because I'm a bit of a biking snob and also feel quite strong. I didn't think I needed to go there. Anyway, the upshot of it is, after tootling around on Karen's bike, I was completely sold. And so sadly, Karen is no longer alive, but the bike program is really, was built in her honor. And I really see that we're making inroads here in Burlington, in part because of her insistence. So although the program is fairly new, again, just a couple months old, we have over 60 e-bikes on the road now as a result of our rebate program. So I'll end it there and just thank you again for the opportunity to share news about our program and our enthusiasm for it.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer, for sharing, and thank you especially for the story at the end. One of my favorite aspects of the work that we do are the stories that people tell about their first experience in an electric car or even on an electric bike. And so thank you for sharing that. That's so important to really getting buy-in for these new technologies and new mobility options. Thank you, and thank you for your presentation in general. And so now we are going to shift gears down to Austin. Our next speaker is Karl Popham, and he leads Austin Energy's Emerging Technologies and Electric Vehicles team. And he's a Department of Energy principal investigator on 3 separate initiatives that involve renewables, energy storage, and mobility. He also is the co-author of the book, Smart Cities, Applications, Technologies, Standards, and Driving Factors, published by Springer. And then just to transition, Austin Energy is doing a lot of incredible work to provide a swift transition to electric vehicles. And like Jennifer, Karl brings a wealth of knowledge and about best practices in this space. So without further ado, I will get Karl's slides up and allow him to take the reins from here.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Here, let me rewind my deck here a little bit here. Where are we? So what I'm going to talk about today, it's basically I cherry-picked a few slides of a larger deck of why should utilities invest in transportation electrification. I just gave this earlier today for our employees as part of AE Learning Week, and I kind of want to share that with other utilities and how to frame the argument, how to understand the threats and opportunities, and why Austin Energy is seen as going all in on transportation electrification. So I was just going to talk a little bit about that. So just a shout out to the team here. So it's electric vehicles and emerging technologies. You'll see a lot of the same faces on the EVT team as the Shines leadership team. Shines is a project to integrate storage and solar. There also is a vehicle to grid component of that. So for one of us to understand why do we want to go after that, we have to understand what are the utilities' goals or objectives. So they're showed here, and then earlier I drilled down into 4 of these, and I'm going to share those with you and the utilities' thinking on these. So the drill down will be on financial health, grid modernization, environment, and customer collaboration. So those are 4 goals that line up very well. So if any of those areas of our interest to you, we think you as utilities should have a program around electrification. So let's look at the Texas market. So our grid operators, ERCOT, they produce something called the long-term system assessment. So they just did some system thought leadership, if you will, around what does a 20% growth curve look like in Texas, and how many EVs would that be? And so what our team did is, well, what would that mean to Austin? So what 20% growth, which is not an aggressive number for us, our 3-year annual growth rate has been closer to 40% here in Austin. So 20% is not a stretch goal. And the way compound interest, and you look at a lot of other factors of new vehicles coming on the market, we don't think this is a big target. So just looking at e-fuel services alone, just people, individual consumers plugging in their cars, still doing the average 12,000 miles a year. If we were to maintain our percentage of ownership of the Texas market, which right now is 23%, but we rounded down to 20% for this exercise, that would mean $128 million new revenue to the utility, about a little over 300,000 EVs, 1.2 million megawatt hours of new load. And a lot of people talk about EVs as load growth. But it's a different. It has a lot of potential to be smart load growth. A lot of our traditional load growth here in the Sun Belt is primarily around 4 summer months, and it's around air conditioning load. EVs are fairly consistent all 12 months out of the year. People generally drive the same amount of miles, so it's not like we're competing over peak. And the majority do fuel up. They plug in when they go home and fuel up at night. And the majority of our drivers even do that in just a level 1 outlet. So there's no increase in capital expense. So what we're doing is we're leveraging a capital-intensive business like an electric utility is, and bringing in a whole new revenue stream into the utility. One thing I really try to promote is the right sizing of charging. Most people out there, I mean, they're used to a gallon of gas, and it's a gallon of gas is a gallon of gas. For we in the electric utility know it's a completely different cost model of when you charge and how fast you want to charge. So here is just kind of a simple deployment of, level 1 exists today, and it is the number 1 charging we have. I mean, if I ask, we have over 700 level 2 charging ports, but really, if I ask, well, how many charging, ports do we have in Austin? Probably about 80 million or so. I mean, every level 1 outlet, every 110 outlet is a potential charging port for cars, and that is the number 1 way our consumers charge today. It's equivalent of plugging in a hairdryer overnight. It's when the ERCOT market, our electricity markets are at their lowest. There's potential for overcapacity of wind here in Texas. It leverages existing infrastructure. It's really a great win. Then we have the level 2. That's 700 ports and growing here in Austin. Very popular at workplace and multifamily. For there, we have a program for $17 a month for unlimited fill-ups or $2 an hour. And then we just started rolling out our DC fast charging stations. I'm going to tell you about our strategy there, or what you utilities might want to be thinking about. So on right sizing, even though DC is significantly more, 100,000 versus already exist or $75 for a level 1. I mean, those are big difference, price variable difference. Also, there's, you're susceptible to demand charges and other fueling costs by having that big of a pipe. So why even do DC fast? So our strategy isn't for people who have a home or have some place to charge to as, well, let's push them to DC fast. That's not the strategy at all. We want to enable high mileage applications like taxis, gig economy drivers, support fuel ups for people traveling on Texas highways, also be required for the future of electric autonomous mobility. There's a picture down the bottom right. General Motors, they do have a pretty cool solution called Maven, GM Maven. When they came to Austin, even though they're in several cities, Austin was the first city where they went all electric. So they bring in a fleet of electric bolts, great customers for DC fast, and our citizens have job opportunities by renting these with fuel and insurance all paid for, and to encourage them then to take that vehicle and get a job in the gig economy through a great application for a city. So what does a charging hub look like? It's a great new commercial account, basically. So here's an example of 8 DC fast stations. This is obviously Tesla. This is on southbound I-35 in Austin. And from a utility perspective, they took about 1,000 square feet of space, eight parking spots, and went from zero energy need or zero energy interest utility perspective and turned it into a 450 kW demand size account. So that would 450 kW for those not in utility business is almost equivalent of about 100,000 square foot Target big box store. And so very good revenue streams, and we want to encourage this, so much so where you can see the headline in the APPA where Austin Energy sees third-party EV as win-win. We did go to City Council and recently got approved a change in city code to specifically allow the metering and resale of electricity for the sole purpose of EV charging in our territory. And as a public power, that's a big deal to want market competition. Why we do it is by looking at the analysis is this is very profitable revenue for the utility, and it also gives more choices and options and frankly EV stations by having that market competition in our territory. We also are rolling out EVs for the city fleet. From the cost savings perspective, the city fleet officers estimated it's going to save the city $3.5 million over 10 years on the EVs they got for the city. Also, obviously, significant emission reductions. So our future at Austin Energy 2027 looks like this: 65% renewable, with the latest PPA under thought right now. We'll get to 50% probably this year on solar and wind. Our goal is 65% by 2027, so we're well on track for that goal. But there's also energy efficiency savings, solar and storage, so a 30 megawatt storage goal as well, and we support the city-wide initiative to have zero CO2 emissions overall in the city. So what does net zero look like? So we know, so the gray is, the two main things people use energy for. It's for homes, and that's electricity, and it's for getting around, and that's transportation. So that's mostly fueled by fossil fuel or gasoline directly, and then you have electricity generation. So in Austin, we are already on a sharp path and decline and where we need to go to support the net zero target for Austin. That's that gray area. But the big unknown still is the transportation, because that deals with a lot of consumer behavior and different options and the average of one person in a car and all those kind of things. The most scalable and largest thing of consumer behavior today is plugging that fossil fuel cars, and instead of having them fuel up with gas, having them plug into 100% renewable energy source. Also, the storage capacity, you notice we mentioned we have a 30 megawatt storage goal by 2027. So to put that in perspective, 320,000 EVs, that's the ERCOT scenario analysis by 2031, that would represent 1,600 megawatts of storage, or 19,200 megawatt hours of storage going around, with wheels and going around our city. But keep in mind, the average time people use their personally owned vehicle is right around 4%. 96% it's parked somewhere, and so they've already spent the money on the battery. So how can we get extra value either by demand response or potential even two-way of those battery distributed assets? This just shows our local Austin growth, just continuing to grow. You can see the gray on the right. That's the introduction of the Model 3 in our territory, so big chunk up. So we're cruising around about 180 new EVs a month is kind of where we're at right now, and we continue to see that pick up based on where the growth of the industry going. A lot of big announcements by manufacturers of how many their vehicles. As we see more and more options, we'll continue to see that kind of impact on that growth there. I did mention a vehicle-to-grid aspect of it. This is called the Austin Shines Project, part of a DOE grant. It's a very aggressive program around integrating storage and energy storage with PV solar at both commercial grid scale assets as well as residential. It does include incorporating EVs as part of the aggregated residential battery fleet as part of the Shine solution, virtual power plant technologies with real-time feeds into market, weather conditions, and et cetera. We have a residential program, a time of use rate. We also have residential rebates for level 2 charging at home. We have a very active outreach program. We have an electric drive in downtown Austin. On the right there, you can see our new mascot, Stevie, the EV-loving T-Rex. That's getting a lot of social media play. Just in social media alone, Stevie there has over 600,000 views and hits, and mostly in the local social media scene, so he definitely gets out. And a lot of this helps generate branding for the utility. I mean, this is a real winner solution, I think, and a really great story for utilities to be involved in. Here's some example of some headlines, all just within the few months, most recently being above the fold front page of our largest local newspaper, the Austin American-Statesman, how Austin is going all in on charging stations. So that's kind of rare for the utility to get a front page news article, and generally it's probably not a good news story, maybe a contentious rate case or some sort of major outage, but having them post on just the positiveness of going EV is very good, just kind of for our branding and marketing. So over the years, we've launched over 700 charging ports. Yeah, I've been in the utility 13 years, and for the last 7 years in this role as Electric Vehicles Emerging Technologies Manager. So I'm very familiar with all the roles and the function and the strategy. We started with 113 charging ports as part of a grant in 2012, a little over 700 and growing, and we're just now rolling out our DC Fast network to include getting some grant funds, some local state grant funds, and then our charging is unlimited for $17 a month, or if you don't join the membership, $2 an hour, and that's backed by 100% Texas Wind. And just about done. We did launch EVs for Everyone. That's our low-income program. A lot of great outreach there. Next week we're launching EVs for Schools, which is curriculum, STEM-based curriculum for the kids and infrastructure for the teachers, and using charging stations as a scientific study tool, just to kind of help with. And the school we're launching it at, it's several schools in Austin Independent School District, but the school we're doing the ribbon cutting is about 80% low-income kids. Just bringing a showcase to sustainable mobility of the future and having some science-based curriculum around that. On the left is some folks as part of a low-income outreach event. Instead of getting a second car, they sent us a note how they realized that getting 2 electric bikes was much better for them than a second car, and that's the photo of that family that went all electric. We also do have a rebate program, just like Brett. So we have the same kind of similar $300 per bike, $400 per bike if you bring in a whole fleet. We have partners like Ride Texas and 13 authorized resellers here in Austin for electric bike. I love that program. We get so many great comments on it, so many great handwritten notes about how that's kind of changed their life. It's a wonderful low-cost program to roll out. I encourage everyone to kind of get into the bike electrification. Here in Austin, we have also been swamped with electric scooters. So I don't know if they've come to your town yet, but if they do, it's almost overnight. We went from 0 to within a few months. In July alone, we had 140,000 trips and 200,000 miles in electric scooters and dockless electric bikes in our territory. We're working with one of them, Jump, to bring these micro charging stations at low-income communities as well. They have a lot of great programs in the e-scooters. It's really just, and people love them or hate them. They're very divisive, but from a utility and transportation electrification, from the engineering perspective, they're fantastic. They really help move the needle, but there's definitely some challenges to your community. We're also working with Cap Metro on electrifying their buses, and as part of the shared electric autonomous roadmap, we did publish the Smart Mobility Roadmap last year. It is open for public comment. It shows our vision of the future of being transportation is on shared autonomous or self-driving, and here in Austin, we also want to make sure it's electric, because shame on us if we don't capture that next wave of mobility future on the electric platform, and we give that up to oil and gas industries. So that ends my presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Karl. And so that concludes the presentation segment of the webinar. So we're going to now open up the floor to questions. So I don't see any in the chat box on the webinar. So at this point, if you would like to ask a question, go right ahead and just speak it out.
So this is Christine. I have a question. Karl, you talked briefly about the e-bike program that you have and connecting it to low-income customers, and that buying an e-bike is, just a lot cheaper than buying an EV, which makes a lot of sense. And just really impressed by both of the e-bike programs in Burlington and Austin. And I guess I was wondering, and maybe both of you could talk about this, purchasing an e-bike is, much lower cost than buying an EV, and kind of gets people comfortable with the idea of charging something and electrified transportation. Do either of you know about any research, whether it's been formal research or more anecdotal, about how owning an e-bike kind of makes you more predisposed to purchasing an EV next?
I think it's anecdotal. Do you have any hard and fast information, Karl? This is Jennifer.
No, what we've seen, no, I haven't seen that. What I've seen more, and our program has been around for 6 years, so it's a pretty mature program. It over a year and a half ago, it evolved into really pushing it to also fleets. So we partnered with Ride Texas, a lot of outreach events, and then more recently with Jump and some of the electric bike things about bringing and bike share, bringing these to low-income communities. So that's kind of been the evolution of our program. What I find is, no, not necessarily anecdotally, I find people who maybe used to like a bike and then they couldn't for whatever reason, bad need, and they're thankful now they found the love of a bike again. I've seen some people who want to commute to and from bikes, and we're pretty bike commuting friendly, but there's that one hill, and they just didn't feel confident in their physical fitness now, but if they could just do that one hill, and then they got an electric bike, and then you can, a lot of these bikes, you control the amount of assist. So at first they might have heavy assist, and then they start doing lower and lower in assist. It's kind of them segueing them into, giving them those training wheels, for lack of a better word, from a fitness perspective of going bike. So that's kind of what I'm seeing. I'm not necessarily seeing someone doing hey, I got an e-bike and now I'm plugging in. I'm thinking it as just another choice, and what we're wanting to really push is when we talk to our low-income communities, a lot of the perception is bikes is for kind of a toy for the wealthier people and not really makes sense for them. But once they get on an electric bike and you do electric bike, their eyes really open up and they see the configurations of the groceries and whatnot. It's like, yeah, I don't need a car. This works great for me. There's some really great light bulb moments, and you double down that with some of the rideshare companies that will be parking more of these type of systems at our low income communities, like foundation communities, HACA, LifeWorks, et cetera. It just makes a nice potential life-changing low-cost mobility service for these folks.
I would agree with Karl. I think I would just add that I think we are anecdotally imagining, as soon as people become more familiar with e-bikes, that, oh, I've tasted electrification. It's not overwhelming. Taking out the battery and charging it at home is not the stressor that I imagined it would be, and that I could see now as a family moving into an electric vehicle. So it will be really interesting to start capturing those stories, because undoubtedly I think they will occur. And I do believe that electric bikes are sort of greasing the skids in many cases for folks that are looking for full-on electrification.
And that's good. And our focus has always been really on transportation electrification. EVs is one component, or a big component, but really it's about a lot of different ways. And then even transportation electrification is part of a larger mobility of the future, which even includes working from home, walking, bike, and public transit. So it's really part of an ecosystem. And in anything new and disruptive, and micro transit, those e-scooters, it just hit South Park episode. I think they did a good job of capturing the love and hate of these e-scooters. They will at some point come into your market, and it will be very disruptive. Talking to transportation folks, our department, they said they've never seen anything like this in their decades of being transportation, something that got introduced so quickly and the amount of volume that it instantly took up. So, it's just one more thing on the horizon. We are transferring more miles onto electric platform.
Thank you. That was very interesting. And yeah, I rode an e-bike for the first time a few months ago, and it's amazing. So it does seem like they're going to really change the urban landscape.
I have sort of a follow-up question to that. Speaking of e-bikes and e-scooters and micro-transit, have either of you spent any time or done any smaller projects addressing the first mile, last mile problem for people who maybe want to, maybe they want to take the bus, but it's 2 miles from their house and they can't park nearby? Is there any space for, the electric microtransit options to fill that void?
I think without a doubt we're seeing it. I do see at bus stations generally a collection of the scooters here in Austin. When I took one, I just took one to the bus route that I came in on that day, the 803 here in Austin. So I think it does have a very nice, quick niche. And the thing I like about it, there's really no waiting for it. The problem I have with first and last mile solutions, in and of itself, they're great for transportation folks, but people don't like them unless that first and last mile is around like a long distance commuter rail where you're on it for like an hour or something like that. Here in Austin, we're so dense. No one wants to take, one little shuttle that takes you a mile and then you go to a bus transit and then you do 3 miles, 2 miles on a bus and then you go. It just sounds terrible. Where a microtransit is really the convenience of walking. It's walking to the bus stop that gets you there a little bit quicker, maybe in Texas a little less sweatier, is kind of what we're seeing.
What I'm imagining is going to be an issue in Burlington as our bus fleet becomes more robust and as we add electric buses. I don't know what you're finding, Karl, but I think the challenge is you can't lift up an electric bike particularly easily to put on the front of a bike in front of a bus in that traditional bike rack. So we're going to have to think about sort of the ease by which people can lift electric bikes, or the degree to which a personal electric bike is part of that first and last mile. I see the sort of the scooters and I see the bike share programs playing particularly important roles. But we've had people ask us about, can I lift up the bike and can I put it on the bus like I would have with my regular bike? So we'll see how the technology on the front of the bus changes for folks, but the bike racks, that is.
Yeah, I see electric bikes as a commuter solution in of itself, not first last mile, if you will. I just don't like the term first last mile, but I'll go ahead and use it. What I see for first last is bike share and even those electric scooters. That's because you just leave it there. You're not humping it on the bike. You're not humping it on the rack or on the bus. If someone goes all electric, the range on those are great and the speed. That's someone who just wants to commute in on that bike. In my opinion, especially here in Austin.
Yeah, I'm thinking Vermont is rural, so we have just different challenges.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So Kelly, I don't know if you saw, but there was a question that came in via chat. So we could just read it.
I will. Yeah, I'll be happy to read that one out. So the question is, what were the actions that helped foster successful buy-in from your respective cities, ratepayers, city government, et cetera, to support EV programs?
Well, what I do in Austin, I align everything we do with council objectives when I bring something to them. I'm also part of a very small meeting hosted by our chair of our mobility committee, Councilmember Kitchen, so I meet with her about once a month. So one thing is just to have a lot of conversation with the stakeholders so you're not surprising them and you're giving them the information they need of why you're doing it. Internal to the utility, when I first started talking about a change in city code we recently did, I'd kind of have this whole argument and I'd cover a lot of things kind of nebulous. But when I found our executives kind of paying a little more attention is when I got to an actual bill of a customer, of a new commercial account that was doing EV charging hubs. And so then I put that in the very front. And the equation for internal was, this is a commercial customer. Do we want to support more of this or do we want less of this? And university, we want these are great accounts. All right, so here's what it takes. So I think it's about messaging and being very upfront right away of why it's relevant to something they're doing. I mean, we're the third largest city-owned utility and the largest utility that still reports directly to our city council. We don't have a professional board, if you will. And so anything I do, I say, well, this is part of, you all passed a resolution on being a net zero city by 2050, or you passed this resolution on fleet electrification, whatever it is. Here's what a project actually looks like to do that. So I just align things with their visions and their goals they've set for the community and put it in a framework that they can understand. I think I'm 100% on any request for council action, ordinance change, or resolution
I think I'm 100% over 7 years of city council. I don't think we've ever been told no, frankly. So I think we have a pretty good batting average. So that's dozens of different, amendments and RCAs and whatnot over the years. So I think by doing that, that's been helpful.
Yeah, I would just echo aligning the electric bike or the EV rebate program to our net zero energy strategy, which the city council has sort of approved, and reminding them that the fact that they did approve our transition to net zero, and that this was going to be an important part of us getting there. I think they're really bought into the strategic plan, and so this feeds into that.
Great, thank you. If there are any other questions, please feel free to share them in the chat box. It appears that maybe some of you are muted, and I'm trying to troubleshoot it as we speak, but I'm not having much success. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask in, please feel free to type those. Or if you see an unmute option on your own device, go ahead and click that. All right, I've got another question here. So what have been some of the biggest challenges that you're facing in scaling your transportation electrification programs?
So from Austin Energy's perspective, it is, one is having the staff to, you have a growing market, and typically, utilities, we like to try to keep our budgets pretty flat and our staff pretty flat. And so one is being creative on how we get resources. I have quite a few contractors on our team. I'm actually hiring 2 new ones, got a new city employee that we just hired. So kind of keeping up on the resources you need. Also, everything we implement has always been about, okay, this is great for 1,000 vehicles or to our current 6,000 EVs. What happens, will this work if it's 100,000 EVs? I ask about that in any process. So based on that, we've gone to a lot of automation. So we've integrated into our customer kill and billing system for that subscription fee. When we first rolled it out, it was a manual process. We've given a lot of information to our 311 and utility call centers so they can do first call resolution. Next step will be actually get them to be able to kind of provision cards for us as well. So it's really about thinking ahead when we've just gone to an automated rebate system called EECP. So it's about being understanding that we have to leverage a lot of technologies, and then when we look at our process is really stay away from anything that just doesn't feel scalable.
And I can just quickly mention in the case of Burlington, although we do have an EV rebate program, $1,800 if you're a lower moderate income customer and $1,200 if you're not, I think the reach is still too great for most of our customers. So it's going to require the full-on cost of the technology to drop in order to become more cost-effective for households. I think that's the biggest constraint we see right now is just the overall cost of the vehicle.
Yeah, we saw it. We thought the time was right. We're starting to see a used EV market. Some of our council members in low-income districts have bought used EVs just for themselves, so they kind of get it. But that reaches kind of the low to moderate income tier. We gotten some feedback from low-income communities where people buy cars because they know how they're going to be maintained. Like their uncle works on Chevy trucks, so they're always going to buy a Chevy truck because their uncle owns a little shop around the corner. So it's those kind of stories. So kind of them understanding how to maintain what the cost is, and then being comprehensive in the programs. It's not just about getting one person in a gas car and putting that one person in EV. It's getting to think about other ways of getting around. And future programs like shared electric autonomous vehicles, that will be pennies on the dollar of what it is today once it goes to scale. So that there's a lot of challenges there. But when you use something 80% of the time versus 4% of the time, a vehicle, one is you really can make the capital cost less, and then when you get rid of the driver, and that's autonomous. So there's really a lot of opportunities to make next wave mobility a lot more affordable.
And could you each actually comment on whether or not there are any state level or even region level incentives that could be coupled with the federal tax credit for purchasing EVs? So in Oregon, we have a state rebate, but I would imagine many of us on this call, myself included, aren't as familiar with some of those programs that exist in other parts of the country.
Texas has a $2,500 state rebate that got introduced beginning of the year as part of Senate Bill 26. Austin Energy has rebates for level 2 home charging, as well as electric bike rebates. We also do rebates on hosts that want to provide public infrastructure for customers, multifamily residents, or their employees.
A similar situation in Burlington. I would only add that last year our Nissan dealership was interested in getting the 2017s off the lot, so they offered a $10,000 rebate on their Nissan Leaf, and we saw more Nissan Leafs being sold out of that one small office in northern Vermont than apparently were sold by every other dealership with the exception of San Francisco's. So that was extremely helpful to add to the federal tax credit as well as BED's rebate. We won't see that happening again soon, no doubt.
Yeah, Nissan did what they call the community buy program with Austin. You had to be an Austin Energy customer, and that was $3,500 off. So not as good as that $10,000, but yeah, we can see promotions with specific car manufacturers and kind of bundling your message. So that was for any city employee as well as Austin Energy customers could take an additional $3,500 off a Leaf, and we've seen that with some other manufacturers. That's always a nice way to go.
Great, thank you. All right, another question on the chat. Have you been looking into efforts to support low to moderate income customers with the purchase of used EVs?
So at Austin Energy, our program is called EVs for Everyone. It was originally funded thanks basically to a networking event when I was at the EV roadmap that Forth puts on. Met the philanthropic organization, a few of them, specifically 11th Hour, and they did a philanthropic grant for us to pursue that and hire staff to go about it. So what we've seen with that is one is having a comprehensive approach to include different ride shares. Part of the EVs for Everyone program includes our multi-family charging expansion. It includes part of it is on the electrification of buses, because it also cleans the air around low-income communities. Low-income communities are more riding on the buses, but it's also quieter. It's also noise pollution as well as NOx emissions. It includes working with companies like Maven to bring job opportunities to be gig drivers, because these people don't have a car or a nice enough car to participate on it. So really what a lot of it is taking the programs and ideas you have today, hiring someone who is just focused on that community or demographic, and making sure we're looking at it through that lens is what's been helpful to us. So the person I hired to lead that program had zero utility experience. We could teach them all that. We hired someone in the last 12 years, was at one of our largest nonprofits here in Austin, Meals on Wheels. So she knew, more importantly, the demographic and the churches and the leaders and the folks we wanted to reach and how to make it relevant to them and making it meaningful. So I would encourage, when you get into that, choose your hiring well. Don't hire a utility person. Hire someone who knows the demographic, because you can train them on that stuff. And you will quickly find you have a lot you can bear, at least here being a community-owned utility, we do, but you just needed that person at the table consistently in the team, embedded in the team, representing that demographic to make sure we were being all inclusive. That's how it worked for us anyway.
I think I just lost, let's see. Can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, great. Okay. Sorry, Kelly, go ahead. I think you had another question.
Maybe we lost our conference because it did hit 3 o'clock.
Could be, yeah.
Oh, I'm muted.
Right,
That's why. I was on mute. My apologies. The question, Jennifer, was what is the total cost to implement the e-bike rebate program?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I couldn't begin to tell enough time. What I can say, we've invested $40,000 in the what we call the lending library that Local Motion manages for us, and then of course the $200 per bike. So it's 60 bikes thus far over the last 6 weeks, plus the 40 grand, which will will extend that contract out for another year or two. I mean, it's pretty much a turnkey program since we've essentially partnered with our nonprofit bike advocacy group to run it, process the $200 rebate, submit the forms to us, and work with our customers to get the word out. I hope that's specific enough, but I can tell you that it seems like we've gotten a lot of bang for the buck, and it hasn't been a big upfront cost, with the exception of the lending library.
Great, thank you. All right, so it looks like that's all the questions we've had come through. So if there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up here. I'd just like to extend another big thank you to our speakers, Jennifer and Karl, for joining us today. As I mentioned, this webinar has been recorded and we'll be making it available to you following the conclusion. I'd also like to inform you of 2 upcoming webinars that we're hosting, that Fourth is hosting on workplace charging. The first is next Tuesday, November 13th, and the second is the following Tuesday, November 20th. And actually, when I end this webinar, you'll be redirected via a link with an invitation to register for the webinar that's taking place next week. So I hope you'll join us then. Please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any further questions about the presentations today or the work that Fourth does. And with that, I'd just like to say thank you again to our speakers and to those from Collaborative Efficiencies on the call that have helped facilitate this webinar as well. And we'll talk to you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.